this week, January 20th through January 25th, we have multiple planets going through a conjunction with Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. This is a powerful and intense process, and I'm very excited to speak about it with you today. Okay, let's go ahead and put this on the chart. How do I want to do this? Maybe today we'll use the magnifier because, at least at first here, I really just want to focus in on these planets in Aquarius. Mars is still at the late degrees of Capricorn, and this conjunction. I do need to use another chart, so we'll have to back up and do something a little bit differently in a minute. But let's start with this chart and just sort of go through what's happening with these Pluto conjunctions one at a time. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to give some dates for when everything is exact. So these personal planets have been moving together for quite some time. They traveled together through Capricorn in this little procession, and they went through a great deal. I will talk about that in a minute. That's the other chart I want to look at. And now, as they're entering into Aquarius, they come into a conjunction with Pluto. Here's Pluto. So first, Venus comes into the direct conjunction with Pluto. This is a chart from Wednesday. So I'll give you the exact dates for these, but really they're all active all week. That's for sure. This week is the thick of it. We had a little bit of this over the weekend, and there'll be a little bit next weekend as well. But this weekend is sort of the thick of it. So anytime that you're watching this between, I don't know, the 17th, if we could go back in time, and maybe the 29th or 30th of January, this would all be relevant. Okay, so Venus comes into the exact conjunction. That actually happened on Monday, the 19th, which was yesterday at the time of this recording. But as you can see, they're still very much conjunct here on Wednesday. So this is within orb all week. But they were exactly conjunct on Monday. On Thursday, Mercury here will catch up to that 3 degrees of Pluto point, and we'll have its direct conjunction, perfected conjunction with Pluto. That's on Thursday. And then the sun will be next. On Friday, the 23rd, the sun will perfect its conjunction with Pluto. That's an especially powerful time because the sun sort of functions differently than other points in the sky. So that one's a little bit special. And then it isn't until Tuesday, the 27th, that Mars has come into perfect that conjunction with Pluto. So again, even though this isn't exact, it doesn't really matter the days exactly when all of this happens. We're in this process. We're in this process this week, last weekend, next weekend. So forgive me for having a little bit of a different schedule. If you're a regular viewer of this podcast, I appreciate you, first of all. And I will be back to normal on Monday. Things sort of were a little bit funny because of the new moon and then because of this sequence. And I just wasn't able to stick to that normal schedule. But it's good sometimes to allow for a different structure, because this is a really unique sequence. So this is something that's unfolding through the week and through the weekend. So on Monday, I'll come back and we'll be back to a regular schedule of Monday and Friday mornings for the foreseeable future at that point. Okay, so let's actually take a minute and look back at look at a different chart for a minute. I want to talk about what these planets have been through. Let's go here. This is from just a few days ago. This is from over the weekend. And you could actually see this configuration as well when you look back at this old report. Let me just actually get rid of this. Okay. So you can see these planets have moved into Aquarius and they're coming into that conjunction with Pluto. Mars here is still in Capricorn, doing what all these planets just finished doing, right? Mars is trining Uranus down here in Taurus and sextiling Saturn and Neptune at the final degrees, the final days that they're spending in Pisces. So communicating with the outer planets. But what you can see, if we go back just a few days, again, this is just from over the weekend. This is a chart from the 17th, from Saturday. So you can see the sun is there with Mars and Mercury's there too, right? And they're in this triangle configuration where they're trining Uranus, sextiling Saturn and Neptune. And you can also see on this chart a little bit of the other things that these planets just went through, right? There is, as they're traveling through around about the 22nd degree point, before they get to those outer planets, they were in a square with Chiron. And a little bit before that, it was exact that they were opposing Jupiter here. And these two are sort of squaring each other, so that's a little bit of a T-square pattern. And there's something about the Capricorn story that was really relevant here, because here these planets are meeting up with Pluto and Aquarius. And we had the Capricorn new moon, which sort of brought everything to a head as well. Ruled by Saturn, working with these outer planet configurations. They've just been traveling so much through Capricorn, and it's so serious and it's so much about the past. And I think that we were looking back at the past as we made this transition, over the weekend, as we worked with that Capricorn new moon last week. We were processing, even going all the way back to those Pluto and Capricorn years, like 2008 through 2023. Planning and preparing for the future, preparing for the future with the lessons that we learned during that time. And there was something about Jupiter and Chiron being mixed up in that process, as you can see on this chart, and the new moon in Capricorn as well. So the fact that these planets here this week are coming off of that, you can still see the alignment very active here because Mars is doing it. So we have those alignments with Saturn and Neptune and with Uranus, still active from Mars. But, it's interesting how a conjunction is a different kind of configuration. You read it differently and it shows up very differently, because it's not that the planets are interacting with each other. It's that they're fusing, they're combining energies. And that's very different than an interaction, right? There can be all different kinds of interactions. Fusing energies is like a whole separate thing. And it's funny always to me how you can't see a conjunction depicted on a chart as easily when you're just looking at it like this. And that makes sense because the planets are just together. But just to say, this chart actually looks so simple. This triangle is really jumping out at us. And this was a beautiful new moon in Capricorn. This has been a beautiful process. These are harmonious alignments for sure. But it was working with some tough planets through those squares. It was working with Chiron, which is a little bit difficult. Uranus is an interesting planet to work with. We have these planets back in their old signs where they spent years. They haven't moved on yet to where they're going just in the next couple weeks and days in the case of Neptune and Saturn. Uranus too is on the way out. So anyway, we were looking back to the past. We were processing things from the past. We've been planning, we've been preparing, we've been focused on these lessons so that we could move into the future with all that we know. And now in Aquarius, Pluto in Aquarius is going to conjunct all of these planets. Sort of, let's go back to our magnifier. Sort of wash them in Pluto in Aquariusness. And that is very, very future oriented. That is that feeling of really bringing them into the future. But now can't be the future, right? Now can only be now. And I think that being present in the now somehow really is a part of all of this. You know, I think especially as Uranus moves into, I just want to make sure yeah, I did. Sorry. um, as Uranus moves into Gemini, the pace sort of kicks up. And the astrology is very active for this next month and a half or so. We have eclipse season coming up. We have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So I think that finding that peace and that presence and that stability in the present, in the now, even though we're sort of in the future, and it feels new and different and things are happening quickly. And we don't know exactly what's happening. We don't know exactly what everything's going to look like. We don't know exactly what to do. Somehow, how can the lessons that you learned through the challenges that you've been through for the last few years, couple decades, depending on your life experience, depending on how old you are, depending on a lot of factors, whatever lessons you've learned from the past, likely during Pluto in Capricorn years, 2008 through 2023, how can those lessons help you be the person? It's not even about thinking about these things. It's about being the person who can sort of step into this new future as well equipped as possible. And I think it helps us to really process the lessons that we've learned in the past, incorporate them into who we are now in order to do that. Forgiving, finding presence and strength and forgiveness for self, for others, taking responsibility for what we needed to take responsibility for, being responsible in the present moment now. And I don't think that this is about looking back. I do think it's about not needing the present to look like the past. I think in some ways it's about looking back in order to let it go, learn what needs to be learned, take responsibility where it needs to be taken, and having that past become a foundation for the future, not a pain point, you know? And that's the difference when we take responsibility, when we learn lessons, when we stay active in the story of our life and we think about how to move into the future as grounded and steady and wise as possible. There is something here about not needing, this Pluto and Aquarius energy, even though Pluto's been here for a while, it's still so future oriented. So we might not understand exactly what we're moving into, what we're moving through, and that's okay. It's the fact that there's sort of these personal planets are working through that future oriented process that feels like a big deal. But it can feel intense. This can be potentially a little bit rebellious, a little bit of a rebellious energy. We can feel empowered with a transit like this. There can be themes around, technology, different forms of communication. There is sort of a uniqueness to Aquarius where so thinking about the future and also not needing to fit in, not needing others' approval. Not even sometimes I think Aquarius energy doesn't even understand why anyone would try to fit in. It's not even that you're okay with not fitting in. It's like Aquarius energy is sort of like, why would anybody even really want that? And at the same time, I don't want to pretend that I know what this is going to look like, because we are talking now about so many future oriented transits. Often when you listen to astrology, you'll hear people say things like, think back to February of 2023. What was going on with you then? This is a repetition of that cycle. You won't hear as much of that for a little while because we're moving through transits for the first time with everything the way it is right now. So eventually these times will become some of that, but no, we're doing things for the first time here. But the future is now. But we can't get stuck in the past or the future. We have to kind of be present in the now. Um the future can't be now. Now can only be now. And I think we're starting to see this week that we should do things quite differently now than we have in the past. Now that it's the future, now that we've learned from the past, now that we're ready. So it's kind of intense stuff with Pluto conjunctions here, but we're ready. And I think it could be an interesting and potentially a different kind of week, um, which is really exciting. It's exciting. So thank you for watching. I'm going to take a minute and look through the chat here. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for being here. Feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat. Again, a little bit of a different structure. I will be back on Monday, back to the normal schedule. I will also attach some relevant astrology videos here, and be sure to check out Astrology Reports Best Viewed by Rising Sign on my channel as well. Yes, definitely check those out for some of the specific placements. I'm seeing some questions about that. It's good to see you all. Hi, Lynn. Yes. I'm glad we can sort of, enjoy this without taking it too seriously. We should all have other methods, other practices that we use to help us learn and ground, for sure. I certainly do. Astrology is just a fun tool for introspection, for personal growth. Good morning, Miss Tell. It's nice to see you. You've been around, Miss Tell's been around for a long time. You were an early subscriber. I really appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate everyone who's watching and subscribing, and appreciate you watching this video. Yeah, for specific placements of all of this, check out January horoscopes, February once they're out. I also did 3 key transits. Um, and I'll attach a couple other relevant astrology videos here, and I will be back on Monday. Thank you so much. Have a great week. It's exciting.